Welcome to the Laws of Style, featuring conversations on creativity, fashion, and the law from the leading edge of our economy and culture. Hosted by noted fashion lawyer Douglas Hand.
Hello and welcome to the Laws of Style. Downloading to you from New York City, I'm your host, Douglas Hand, fashion lawyer and fashion law professor. And today I am joined by shoe designer and D2C entrepreneur, Sarah Flint. Sarah, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, so always best to start at the beginning. You studied at FIT, at Parsons, and then at Ars Sutoria School of Design in Milan. What in your early background led you to study design, and in particular footwear design?
I've always been art obsessed, fashion obsessed, particularly shoe obsessed. I used to try and wear my patent leather tap shoes to school, probably from, as soon as I started dancing at age 5, because they were beautiful patent leather and had a little heel and made an amazing sound. And I had this incredibly stylish grandmother who was an artist and actually lived in Paris. And so I got an early fashion education from her. And I was always sketching and worked in retail in high school. And then I just always knew, I said, I'm going to move to New York. I applied to Parsons and FIT, and that was it. I said, if I don't get into one of those, I'm just going to work for another year at this store, the only luxury store in my town, and which is in Massachusetts. And I did. So I went straight to Parsons from there, and then moved to FIT.
Well, so fashion education, in particular design education, can be very specific, as it should be, on the craft. Mm-hmm. But you are also a business owner, and most of the people I have on the podcast are business owners. What in that education was present to prepare you for that process, or was it completely devoid of any business training?
I think that's a sort of learn as you go, mostly. For me, so I had design training both at Parsons and FIT, and then I moved to Italy specifically to study manufacturing. So I actually went to school there sort of alongside factory workers and learned about the engineering that goes into shoe design. And my whole, reason for starting this brand was that I wanted to create shoes that were not only beautiful, but also, served a purpose in women's everyday lives and were actually comfortable. So that was very, very important for me. But I think, there's so much that you don't know when you go into starting a business. I don't think there's ever, real training for leadership, for, fundraising situations, for, learning from your failures, all of these things that you sort of figure out as you go along.
Yeah, no, it's a tough one. NYU is one of the business schools that has a specific fashion MBA, but of course that's another 2 years lopped onto what is already an impressive CV of educational institutions. And so, I'm sure you were sort of chomping at the bit to get out and get started. So 2013 is when you launched the brand. And you, like many designers before you, named the brand after yourself. Mm-hmm. What went into that decision? I mean, was it just a foregone conclusion? That's who I am, and I'm going to name the brand after myself? Or was there thought behind, this is our trademark and there are implications there?
So that was not the decision right away. Of course, I had, like so many people, a 2-page list of all of the different names that I thought would be amazing. And one of the things that I did early on before starting the business was sort of assemble a group of advisors around me and people that had been successful in the business before me. And in speaking with all of them and going through the list of names and talking through, the why behind each one, every single person said, you have a great name. It's very memorable. It's easy. It's pronounceable in every language. Trying to start a brand is hard enough as it is. You're going to have to promote yourself as a designer and promote the brand. Save yourself some work and do it all at once. Yeah. And so,
Sarah Flint is right out of like a Hollywood blockbuster, right?
Yeah.
Tom
I thought
Cruise and
about
Sarah
just
Flint
Flint.
in.
I thought just Flint could be really interesting as well, but ended up doing the whole thing.
By the way, a board of advisors, that's very business school of you. I mean, that's actually what a lot of startups that come out of MBA programs do, because it's a great way to get, I won't call it free, but cost effective, we will say, and honest and earnest advice from people that are really above the pay grade of what you can afford yet.
Definitely. And some of those people have become actual board members now, which has been interesting. And some said no in the beginning. Howard Sokol, who's one of my board members. Have you met Howard?
I know Howard. Yeah, I know Howard.
Great. So Howard, when I was first introduced to him, we had lunch and I hadn't started the brand and he told me not to do it. He said it was going to be really hard and I should just go work for somebody else. And I sort of kept sending him news about the brand as it launched, and eventually when I got on the Women's Wear 10 of Tomorrow thing, I sent it to him and he sent me a congratulations note, and I said, I know you're too busy, I know you've got a lot going on, but let me take you out to coffee again, let's talk, and eventually convinced him to do it.
That's great. Now the jet fuel of good press, particularly in the fashion industry, is important. But so the eponymous brand, I ask because when you do rounds of financing, or if you have an exit moment, which, it's early days for that, but if and when that happens, you are faced with a bit of chiseling away of ownership over your trademark, which is your name. And so has that presented problems yet for you? Am I now planting the seed for nightmares, for the next decade?
I think that's certainly been a question that people have had, throughout, whether it be, fundraising or otherwise. I think sometimes, even in hiring, a CEO or things like that, which I hired a CEO for the first time right before the pandemic. Excellent timing for me, not the best for her. And, I think one of the questions that people always worry about is, if it's your name, are you going to be willing to sell? Is there going to be an exit moment? And, for me, that's never been, a worry or a question. I think, I look at lots of successful brands that have been able to do that and get past an eponymous founder. Our CEO actually is an amazing woman named Mary Beach, who came from Kate Spade, where she was the CMO for 7 years. And Mary joined after Kate had exited after the sale. And they took that business they took it to an unbelievable place after that period. So I've definitely seen it done. I think it, can be done.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's, it presents potential issues for the namesake, but also on the investor side, there are some stories, the somewhat legendary story of DKNY being dropped from Nordstrom stores after certain comments that Donna herself had made. And this is going back in time to Harvey Weinstein days, who was a friend of hers, and she made some positive comments about him during that time. Nordstrom's dropped her account, and she had no equity in the business whatsoever. So it didn't hurt her at all, but it hurt the owners of DK.
The owners of the business, yeah.
And so there's kind of that human risk that the investors have to deal with. You seem like a very sensible person. So, in your case, it's less so than, we wouldn't expect you to be at some Paris cafe sort of making off-color remarks like Galliano did, or, but there are these examples of an eponymous designer who has kind of torpedoed, in a way, their own brand value.
I think today's designer is also very different than, what it used to be. And one of the things that I didn't anticipate in starting the brand was how much I would become the face of the brand. As much as Donna Karan or any of these people were the face of their brand, they were the face for the fashion community. They weren't the face as much for their customer, because it was before social media. And I think that the real benefit that I've seen is the way I'm able to interact and really have that direct conversation with my customer through social media is something I couldn't have anticipated, but been a real bonus for the brand and for the company.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about social media. It's impossible
to have a conversation about a brand, let alone a direct-to-consumer brand, without talking social media. How much of yourself is in it? It sounds like a lot, but maybe unpack it a little bit.
When I started the brand, we were a wholesale brand. So we started in, first a couple specialty boutiques. In fall 2016, we launched Barney's, New York. And from there, we got into Bloomingdale's, Moda, Shop Up, all of these places. We had about, I think almost 60 doors across the country. And we were in Barney's Japan and a few other places. And in the spring of 2018, I decided, well, before that, a lot of it led to it, but I decided to move to direct to consumer. So I completely dropped all of my wholesale accounts and dropped my prices about 40 to 50%. And there were a lot of things that led to that decision, but I sort of looked at the fashion world around me and the way that I was consuming and the way that my friends were consuming. And there was really sort of a digital revolution going on. It wasn't just Warby Parker eyeglasses and Casper mattresses that you were buying online DTC anymore. There were brands that were selling apparel and, cashmere sweaters and denim and all of these things. And they were growing like crazy. And they were having direct conversations with their customer, offering their customer a better price. And they were creating basics, right? Like really, really good core essentials. But I just saw it and I thought, wow, these companies are making basics and core essentials. But what if you did this with a luxury brand? What if you took a true luxury product made in Italy and sold it direct to consumer and dropped your prices and really had that direct conversation? And there were other frustrating things about working with wholesale that I'm sure you've heard from every designer under the sun.
Indeed. Particularly these days.
Exactly. And I think, one of the questions there were a lot of things that led to this decision, but one of the questions I get a lot is, was there sort of a straw that broke the camel's back on the decision to move to direct to consumer? And there absolutely was. It was a moment when I walked onto the floor of one of these department stores and asked for where my shoes were because they weren't in their normal location. And it took me and the sales associates about 20 minutes to find them. And when we found them, not only did it take us 20 minutes, but they were in 2 different locations. So I was just thinking, oh my God, I am spending money and energy and all of this capital to drive people into the store. They're not going to wait 20 minutes and they're not going to know that they're only seeing part of the assortment. And by the way, it's not the assortment I would choose for this store because I know my customers like this product better than this product. And so that was sort of it. And I went to my board and my investors and said, I want to do this. And they all said, okay, that's a little bold, a little crazy, but tell me the vision. I came up with a totally new business plan. And we ended those relationships in the spring of 2018 and then spring of 2017, and then November 2017 we completely pivoted the business.
That is excellent timing, as you well know, and as your board now well knows. So they should be getting horse picks from you. But I want to unpack a bit of that because there's a lot interesting in what you just said. Certainly on the luxury, back to 2017, virtually no luxury brands had a website that allowed purchase. They're very slow to that, and they've enjoyed the benefit of their positioning that people will go to be able to shop at Chanel because there aren't many places you can get it. They're coming around to that way of thinking, but I think, as a startup and positioning yourself in that way was very shrewd.
Yeah, and I think the thing is there's a lot of true benefits to being a luxury brand, and there's a lot of benefits to being direct to consumer. And I think what we have aimed to do is really redefine that luxury experience and take the best of direct to consumer, which is, the relationship with the customer, the better pricing, the fact that you have complete insight into your customer base, and the best of luxury, which is that you have, an unbelievable lifetime value, You have that sort of prestige that goes around it with celebrity and press from, the Vogues and the Harper's Bazaars of the world, and really merge them in one brand.
Yeah. Well, what's also interesting is there aren't many brands that have straddled that line, started as wholesale, become direct to consumer. And I would guess that you were small enough that it wasn't like turning an aircraft carrier. It was a little bit easier in 2017 for you, which, kudos to you for that.
We gave up revenue, but we weren't Chanel giving up, or not Chanel because they don't sell that much to wholesale, but we weren't, say Manolo Blahnik, who would have been catastrophic.
Yeah, it would. I mean, it's spaghetti to unravel all of those relationships would be very, very difficult, time consuming. But back to starting in wholesale, I mean, if you had started as a direct to consumer brand, and maybe you can comment on this from today's experience on social media and how you're paying for, for ads if you are, or influencers. But I have found that eyeballs are just so expensive these days. And so if you are starting a direct to consumer brand today, you have to be extremely well funded to even just get some little soundbite amidst all the noise that people are bombarded with on whatever social media platform they're on or whenever they're online. Whereas with the wholesale model, you had a few orders from a few anchor wholesale stores and you were in business. So you were able to kind of take that initial push from wholesale and recognition, pivot quickly, and now you're direct to consumer. What are you seeing though in the direct to consumer space with the pricing of eyeballs?
Yeah. Well, I think what wholesale does for you is it gives you credibility as well, particularly when you're at a really high price point. So we came out of this with, a fair amount of credibility, even in the beginning. I remember when we were trying to get press and I was working with Megan, who and she was like, you need to get a major account. You need to get, and once we got Barney's, it was so much easier to get press and all of these things. And of course, that's much more cost effective than it is to pay, a huge amount of money on digital advertising. We went into this transition to direct to consumer with celebrity, press, all of these things that allowed us to, spend a lot less on digital marketing. And we were also able to use that press in our digital marketing. So take that quote from Vogue that says, this is the next great American luxury brand or whatever, and repurpose that into press. It has a much higher ROI than you would imagine for, a traditional ad. But there's no question that digital marketing is expensive and has gotten more and more expensive, particularly in the last year. I think that our approach has always been, what are we best at and where can we win? Because we're never going to beat the biggest brands out there spending the most money on digital ads, but where we can win is really within our community and within the experiences that we create for our community. So you asked a little bit about influencer. We have a brand ambassador program that has, we're over 700 brand ambassadors at this point. And these women are micro influencers. So they are not, most of them have a couple hundred to a couple thousand Instagram followers. So these are not the ones with, 500K or even, 1 million followers, although we have worked with those ones before and they have serve a different purpose. These are women, that are interior decorators, that are lawyers, that are, event planners, that have networks of women in their lives that trust them and look at them as arbiters of taste. And they share the product in exchange for, they share a discount code for the product in exchange for product. So they earn credits towards shoes as they sell and acquire more customers for the brand. And that has become, not just a selling tool and a customer acquisition tool, but really a community for the brands that has had a really, domino effect for us.
Yeah. No, that's a model I'm familiar with, and it's a good one, provided your product is good. I'm seeing more and more brands where their product is good. That becomes almost the fourth leg of the stool in terms of marketing, because the product kind of speaks for itself.
Exactly.
So maybe tell us about what you learned in Italy, how you produce the product, and why women love it.
Yeah, absolutely. So You know, learned a lot in Italy, mainly that there wasn't a good reason that luxury shoes were uncomfortable, other than, you know, mainly luxury shoe designers are men, I have to say. And I don't think they're necessarily fit testing them themselves. But, you know, I think that, first of all, I fell in love with the, you know, the craftsmanship there and the quality and the way that it's handed down from generation to generation. There's a level of pride there that I think you see in the end product. But, you know, we have things like, I've added arch support to the shoes, you know, 6 millimeters of padding, rubber on the bottom, all of these things that I used to get added to my shoes after I would buy them. So I'd buy a nice pair of shoes, and then I'd go to Leather Spa and spend another $80 to put rubber on the bottom so I didn't slip, Dr. Scholl's so my feet weren't killing me, and you know, stretch the toe boxes, because Italian shoes in particular, the toe boxes were so incredibly narrow that your feet would just be dying by the, you know, by the end of a couple of hours. And so I've worked really hard to integrate all of those things into the shoes. But not only that, the shoes have evolved as, you know, as the brand has evolved. And we do take a lot of customer feedback into account. When we launch new products, we test it with customers first. We test it with women with wide feet, narrow feet, high arches, low arches, all of these different things to really make sure that we are creating something that's superior and that women, you know, not only look amazing in, but feel amazing in, because and that doesn't look like orthopedic footwear, because I felt there was a lot of really comfortable shoes out there that were great, but fashionable women didn't want to wear those.
Yeah, the dad sneaker moment has kind of come and gone, right? So back to Italy, though, in particular. I mean, I'm in an Italian suit right now. I mean, look, Italy, Italian craftsmanship is at the apex, really. And in particular, footwear and leather goods is what they are known for, probably most specifically. And you produce entirely in Italy. Is that a conscious choice and almost a element of the branding? Or can artisans that make these types of shoes not be found elsewhere?
Yeah, so, you know, I think our goal has always been to go to where something is done best. So, for example, one of the things that doesn't come from Italy are our embroideries. We go to India for that because they have incredible craftspeople that is their heritage and what they do. We go to a mill in the UK that does unbelievable jacquards. And so that has sort of been our choice. I think, you know, at one point we did espadrilles, and we did those in Spain because that, again, is a heritage item from Spain. And I think that will only continue as we start to expand in different categories for the brand. But, you know, I don't think I can't necessarily speak to every other country because I haven't been to their manufacturing facilities. Right. But what I can speak to is the sort of innovation that you see in Italy, and the care that they put into things, and you know, the fact that we have boots on the ground there and are able to really be in the factories, be working with the artisans there and seeing what's happening.
Well, for our listeners, describe that process.
Particularly in the luxury sector in Italy, and this is not all of Italy, because, by the way, there's different levels of quality of made in Italy for sure. And there are brands that make parts of the shoes other places and then ship them to Italy and they're assembled. That is not us at all. But, you know, the high-end tanneries, the places that we source from, they are all heavily regulated by the government and by the brands. So they have, you know, certifications and things that we do check. You know, we have a production manager who lives in the region where most of our shoes are made. He's in and out of the factories every single day working with them. And so he knows, you know, everything that is going on there. One of the things that our customers have loved that we do is, his name is Mattia, and we have Mondays with Mattia on Instagram often, and he'll take people into the factories on his iPhone and he'll show them what's going on. And I just got back from Italy, actually, where I was at the factories, and, you know, we do things like interviews with the different artisans and, you know, hear about where they came from and what they do. And that is really important to consumers. They want to understand who made their shoes.
Yeah. No, that's great. And the ease with which you can get that content if you're open to just opening your doors up, right?
Yeah.
Is
On an iPhone, iPhone away.
right, right. Well, this is maybe a question that is not answerable, but I'd love just your thoughts or speculations on it. For a long time, it really has been Italy, France, maybe Spain, where most luxury items and most luxury brands in fashion have come from. And I've always wondered, because the raw materials and some of the production takes place in places like India or Peru. Do you think, and this is not for your brand, this is more just a speculative, could a luxury brand emerge from one of these countries that's not in Europe, may not even be thought of as a first world country, but where the artisans, do have a legacy of true skill that could be translated, into a product that would appeal to Western consumers?
Yeah, I think with the right team and infrastructure and, that it could absolutely happen. It sounds very capital intensive to me, but I think that, what is really interesting as well is working with countries, those types of countries that you can find those particular crafts that are native to them. But it also involves, to your point, making sure that you are checking who you're working with, that they are paying a fair wage, and that their working conditions are good, and that's more involved. So that's something that bigger brands do and need to do.
Yeah. Well, let's shift a little and consider your customers and in the changing topography of how women dress for work, how women dress to go out if they're going out. I mean, obviously, we've been 18 to 24 months into a pandemic, and a lot of brands have not had a great experience with that in terms of their sales, but some have had an amazing experience. My environment, you're looking at it for work, I'm in a little box most of the day and no one sees my feet. And so I'm wondering, have you seen a dip because of so much work from home that doesn't feature feet and doesn't feature, marching into a conference room? Or have you seen people with more disposable income because they're not taking trips, that are spending more on your?
I mean, we're definitely seeing a pent-up demand now that people are going out and are very excited to be dressed up. We saw a shift is what we really saw. I mean, we were already a digitally native brand, so that was really helpful. I think it was a lot more challenging for brands that had permanent retail and all of that. And so, we had to make some adjustments pretty early on, like moving a lot of our buys into flats and more casual styles. We certainly did not sell a lot of high heels in the last year, although now I will tell you we are selling an insane amount of heels. We launched slippers, which did incredibly well for us. We happened to be launching silk scarves at the time, or that spring, and so I'm only not wearing one now because I don't have amazing AC and I'm so warm, but amazing Zoom accessory. I think it was really just sort of adjusting our assortment and really focusing on our core and existing customer base. I would say, customer acquisition got much more challenging in the height of the pandemic, for sure. But it's rebounding like crazy now, which is really exciting to see. And, even I think as we look at things changing a little bit again now, I think people are, not going to go back to where they were. They're going to figure out ways to be with their friends outside, to be together and live life in a new normal, as they say.
Yeah. Well, so yes, being online with a storefront that people recognized and that was well built out, and you understood fulfillment was a great advantage during the time when people were kind of in bed shopping or working. Do you envision any brick and mortar presence ever for the brand? And, what would that look like? And how much of that would be a store versus a brand experience?
Yeah, so we had our first pop-up shop in the fall of 2019 in Soho. It was beyond all of our expectations, and it was very, very experiential. It was a more of a showroom model where we would ship. We did have some carry away for our core styles, but it was very much about coming in and experiencing the brand. We had, maman cookies and tea that you were offered, upon arrival. Customers were really encouraged just to try shoes on, and it wasn't so much about purchasing in the moment, although there was a lot of that. It was about feeling those comfort details and features. We had shoe walls, sized shoe walls, basically, where someone could grab a pair of shoes and try them on. And then we had what we call a shoofy moment, where you would take a picture of your shoes and share it on social media. And all of that really just encourage people to get their feet in the shoes, because of all of these comfort details, I know if I can just get people to try the shoes on, that they're going to be sold. But we would say to customers, try it on. What we'll do is we'll write down, the style name, the sizes that you like, and we'll send you an email with all of that information and a discount code so that we could then track it back to that being a in real life customer acquisition. And that is how we envision all of our retail in the future. We paused on pop-ups, obviously, in 2020. We are opening our next pop-up in Washington, D.C. in September. And we have a few more in the books that are in negotiation as well. So I very, very much believe in in-person experiences, particularly for our product, which is such a fit and feel type of thing. And I think that, for us, our whole goal is really redefining what that luxury experience is. And when I think about the experience that I had in so many luxury stores as a shopper, it felt very sort of cold and not friendly. And our stores are just very, very different in the way that I mentioned, or you come in, you're offered, it's not a guy in a suit at the door that you feel like if you're going to touch anything, they'll think you're robbing the place. It's a really inviting and warm atmosphere.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that is what is so great about having that physical space, even if it's a pop-up. In some cases, because it's a pop-up and it's limited in time, is that direct experience with your customer in a way that it sounds like with wholesale accounts, you very much knew you were at arm's length. You were at a Heisman's arm's length from your customer, and not sure how your product was being presented. Maybe a bit about you personally.
Sure.
Who are your, and please, I always get my mom or my grandmother, so I'm gonna say you can't use them.
Oh,
your style inspirations, your personal style inspirations, and it doesn't need to be specific to footwear or even apparel. Just individuals that have maybe informed a little bit the way you design or the way that you've positioned the brand, but are personal to you.
Yes, absolutely. So, I'm sure you get this one a lot too, but very much an old movie fanatic. And so always watching Grace Kelly, Audrey Hepburn, Katharine Hepburn, that sort of vibe is very much in my wheelhouse. And, I know you said no grandmothers, but I'm going to have to tell you about my grandmother because she's
okay.
special. So my grandmother, as I mentioned, she was an artist and lived in Paris. And she had a very unique approach to style. And she collected things she traveled a lot and collected things from all over the world. And one of her philosophies, which is very, much on point with where the trend is today, was that she would say, I don't have a lot of things, but the things that I have are really good. And so she would buy really, really nice things, but not that frequently. And that's very much how I feel about fashion in general, and investing in things that are going to be enduring and are a little bit unique. She also, if she had labels, she used to I remember she had a pair of Armani jeans that she had stitched a pocket square on the back of, because the pocket had like the little Armani logo on it, and she didn't want anyone to see that. She wanted her whole expression. She was choosing the clothes as her own self-expression. She wasn't representing the brand. And so that has also been, very much my approach. And I've met with so many people over the years who have told me, you need a big logo, you need, all of these things that's going to help you in these different markets. And I feel just that way. And maybe it's because that's what, she always told me growing up, that, it should be about how the customer wants to express themselves, not what I want for them.
Yeah. Well, you're certainly allowed to bring that story into it. And I apologize. I mean, everybody, what I find so touching about creatives like yourself is that they are so informed by their family. I mean, honestly, most people do reference a direct parent or grandparent.
But I grew up in Massachusetts. My mother wore Dansko clogs and, Patagonia fleeces. This was not, she was not the fashion icon.
Right. Well, you touched on something that I think will hit a chord for a lot of listeners. Less and better versus, more and many and fashion. So I'll ask this question, which is a pretty hackneyed question. And I'm kind of leading you to a particular answer, but your answer will be your answer. I mean, for you, what is the difference between fashion and style?
Yeah. I mean, when I think about fashion, I think of what is of the moment, right? What is in fashion in that moment. And when I think about style, I think about what is enduring and what is timeless and what will last. And, even when I think about my grandmother, that woman had style. I mean, and it was her own. It was unique and individual. And so I'd really say that's the difference. It's between trend and what is timeless.
So on style, and maybe more on continuing the personal vein here, you're well-traveled. What cities for you do you find women to be the most stylish? And because you're a footwear designer, I mean, let's kind of focus a little on the feet. I'm sure of at least one town that I think you're going to mention, but give me three and give me the reasons why.
Yeah, it's gonna have to be Paris because it's what they care about. Paris, I would say, I could pick any town in Italy. Really, that's the amazing thing. And one thing I will say that I'm very always surprised about is that these women are wearing heels in every moment of their life and on bicycles. I love how you will go through even the town where our shoes are made, which is a tiny little town in Italy, and you've got women dressed to the nines and riding bicycles in heels. And it's just such a part of their self-expression. And luxury is really, so ingrained in them as well. It's not just wealthy women who are wearing luxury items, they really do invest in those pieces. London as well. I think that there are parts of London where you see incredibly stylish women.
Yeah. Well, what about brands, contemporary brands that, whether it's from a product perspective or a customer engagement perspective, that excite you, that you're a fan of right now?
Yeah. From a product perspective, I'm a huge fan of brands like Amelia Wickstead, Alessandra Rich. I love there's a somewhat newer Colombian brand called Agua by Agua Bendita, and all have a bit of a retro vibe, I would say, which I love. And from a customer engagement perspective, there are so many, brands that are doing interesting things. You think of Peloton, you think of, Glossier is a classic one that, that probably everybody says. Boll and Branch is another really good one. And I think all of them really involve their customers in their marketing and in their experience in a very, very unique way.
Well, we are about out of time. Are there any, any shout outs or nonprofits that you're working with that you want to let our listeners know about while we have a little time for it?
Sure. We always work with Girl Up, which is an amazing one. Lower East Side Girls Club, a lot of different sort of women's ones. I would say there's one that I personally work with called Nurturing Minds, and it's a school for girls in Tanzania. That's really amazing.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, listen, thank you so much for joining us. Sarah, have a great rest of your afternoon. And listeners, thanks for tuning in. See you next time.
You've been listening to The Laws of Style with Douglas Hand. For more information, go to our website at www.hballp.com. And you can also follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Hand of the Law. Thank you for tuning in, and stay stylish.